I wanted to make a video for myself. I'm tired of people speaking about me, of people speaking to me, of me begging people to platform my voice. Even if this video gets no traction, I need the truth to be accessible. I know 90% of the people who come to my content just come to trash my existence in the comments, which is why they won't be here this time. I'm going to tell my story. Those who take the time to listen are the ones I want to hear it. I want to take proper time to summarize my life as an athlete. I won't be able to get to everything, and I've faced so many challenges that some are going to slip through the cracks. We'll start where all conservatives are concerned, my birth. Despite being born in New York, I was raised in Maryland, and I grew up in New Jersey. My parents couldn't come up with a name outside of Sadie Rose when they learned I was on the way. And it's a name that I'm proud to carry with me to this day. Much to my mother's dismay, I have very sparring memories of my life in Maryland. I was raised in a house with 2 older siblings, 2 cats, and a dog, and Old Bay seasoning. We moved to New Jersey when I entered 1st grade. I played every sport I could, from baseball to basketball to tap and ballet, but it was track that stole my heart. From my first time running on a gravel track and gym to watching the Summer Olympics, I couldn't wait to enter 6th grade and join my middle school's team. I tried to juggle track, dance, and soccer all at once growing up, but the love I felt for running was unparalleled, and I soon dropped all other commitments. Due to the nature of the school year, cross country came first, and my coaches assumed I should continue distance in track and field due to my high performances. It was the 8th graders above me that fostered my love for track during this early and vital year of my career. They taught me how to grow and strive in the sport and what it meant to find a community in my team. At the end of 7th grade, my coaches dragged me along to states. One of my distance performances had qualified me, but I really don't have any memory of it. What I do remember is being thrown into the 4x4, as distance runners often are. And with my awful 60-something second time, I fell in love with the race. Coming into 8th grade, I completely threw long distance out the window, focusing instead on long jump and 400. My coaches would still throw me in the 800 and 200 directly after it, and I'd be absolutely exhausted, but they wanted the extra points. I remember my first meet of the season in some shitty cold rain, running a 58-second time that started a fire in me to break the school record. I ended up winning states that year with little effort, but it wasn't close enough to beat the school record. It wasn't until our final meet of the season did the race finally click for me, and I found myself running a 55-second race and breaking the school record. It only threw more wood into the fire as I set my sights on high school. My freshman year took a lot to adjust to. Going from racing outdoor in our own lanes on a 400-meter track to racing with a waterfall start inside the Armory's poorly ventilated 200-meter facility was an entirely different beast. I can still remember how many elbows I took to the gut just starting those incredibly rushed races. I was lucky to have such competitive freshmen alongside me that season, and it wasn't an issue for us to end as 4x4 champs together. And we were some of the few freshmen that got to be members of varsity. I viewed the 400 hurdles as a 400-meter dash, but better. But I got a quick wake-up call as I lost my outdoor season to a hip injury at my first meet, and I ended up spending the rest of my freshman year in physical therapy. Looking to redeem myself and prepare to set another school record by senior year, I went into my indoor season sophomore year with a fire still burning. But the indoor 400 continued to screw up my race mentality by simply being 2 laps instead of 1. It didn't help that we rarely ran on a bank or that I never stepped into blocks. I was so excited to finally enter the outdoor season after over a year of waiting and preparing, but COVID stopped us before we could even start. I transferred out of my current high school over COVID when we moved as a family. And in a completely new environment where I knew no one and couldn't leave my house to meet anyone, I fell into depression rather quickly. When we were finally allowed to start practicing as a team, my new coaches wouldn't believe the times I told them I could run, and they wouldn't put me in varsity until I proved it on the track. The only issue was we kept getting quarantined over and over and over again. It wasn't until the last meet of the season was I finally able to run, and I made varsity like I knew I would. When outdoor started, our 4x4 had formed a strong core of our team. With me and my other junior classmate running a 51 alongside strong senior members, our 4x4 thrived. but we failed to properly perform at states. My senior year found my classmate and I as the only upperclassmen left in the sprinter program, and we quickly took the unofficial roles of captains. It was the first day of senior year that I met my boyfriend. My queer ass took to him in an instant, and I've never been luckier. I had known I was trans for so long by then, but I explored it through the safety of my locked door. The town I had previously grown up in was so Republican that the stigma had stuck with me. And even though I wanted to transition more than I wanted to live, I thought that life wasn't possible. It started to eat away at me more and more throughout the year, and I struggled to keep such a core part of myself hidden. But I was so ignorantly confident that it wasn't possible, and I was so uneducated that I couldn't find a solution. And unsurprisingly, my mental health tanked once again. Watching my boyfriend transition made me realize that it wasn't impossible for me. He created a safe space for me to truly be myself without fear. But I was a track athlete, one who was leading a new 4x4 for the team, and one who was on the border of beating our school's 400-meter record. I researched hormone replacement therapy to no end, and I knew that if I chose to be my true self, my performance would diminish, my body would get weaker, and my life would change. But I was so fucking tired. I couldn't keep hiding myself. And at the same time, I didn't want to cause an issue for my team. So with the help of my family and friends in the final months of senior year, I started to take medication. I told my coach, who was incredibly supportive, but we kept it a secret from the team, though some of my underclassmen could tell. Within the first month of medication, my testosterone dropped to undetectable levels and my performance plateaued. Instead of improving in the most vital months of our competition, I fell short of the school record, finishing with a 52nd 400-meter dash. RIT had excitedly recruited me to join the men's team, and I had accepted months before I medically transitioned. And I knew that I had the performance of a D1 athlete, but I valued the university for my education. I would have been our fastest incoming freshman and a shoo-in for the 4x4, but I informed them of my transition, and that quickly fell through. Despite supposedly being faster than my teammates, my body felt like it couldn't keep up at all. Everything felt foreign. My legs wouldn't fire like they used to, my muscles grew tired with minimal effort, and no matter how hard I pushed myself, I wasn't anywhere near where I was mere months ago. When I reached out to my captains and my teammates, they told me it was the rust of summer that I was shaking off. But I had been competing in track and field for 7 years at this point, and I knew something was different. I knew my body couldn't keep up. I went to our athletic trainers, but they wouldn't believe me. They told me some of the same falsities that I hear from Republicans today. The NCAA required me to be on medication for at least a year and hit specific benchmarks. I was required to be on the men's team my freshman year. I despised training with the men, and I despised how I was looked at. I was completely lost in my own shadow as my performance didn't match the athlete I used to be. I ended up taking the year off from track and field without anyone there to properly support me, and as my body changed and grew more and more feminine features, there was no way in hell I was comfortable surrounding myself with the men. It was during that year of training on my own that I truly learned how weak my body had become. When I tried to match the times I'd once hit, I routinely blew out my calves to the point where I couldn't walk for days. My body simply couldn't keep up with the athlete I once was under my gender-affirming medication. I worked extensively with RIT's DEI representative, and it's thanks to her that the athletic department was prepared for me coming in my sophomore year. Entering that sophomore year was incredibly different. The women's team welcomed me with open arms, and I felt accepted. I had no idea where I was as an athlete throughout the early months of preseason, but I was happy to properly be part of a team again. It was our first true time trial that I believe my head coach finally started to understand the impact of my medication. Instead of running the 50-second time he had recruited me under, I dropped a 10-second slower 60-second race. Despite the far more rigorous training regimen and finally using a weight room to train, I dropped 10 seconds in my performance, and the results of that are more evident in my muscles than anything else. For one of my photo projects here at university, I took the time to document just how much I had lost that one year. RIT and I followed the NCAA's policy and submitted full documentation of my lab results and history transitioning. But the NCAA pushed back for further clarification and delayed my competition by a week. I remember how painful it was to watch everyone race while I was forced to be on the sidelines. Our team's second meet forced me to run the 300 meter, a barely raced an event that I found myself in since the 400 was invite only. After my performance, social media blew up and lied about me relentlessly. Libs of TikTok and the Daily Mail especially pushed the lie that I competed the year prior and placed 19th in the 100 meter dash. That statistic was gotten from my high school record book, where I had the 19th fastest time in our school's history. For reference, I only ran the 100 meter once in my entire high school career, and I did it for fun against my underclassmen. It was obviously that they falsified the race to push a narrative that I was some shitty athlete, because they knew mentioning the race that I specialized in, my actual times, and the fact that I didn't even compete a year prior due to strict policy, wouldn't match the narrative they were trying to push. They would never talk about how my muscle volume and strength has lowered drastically, how my testosterone is below 12 NGDL and undetectable, how my bone density has been lowered, how my performance has drastically decreased, how my biology is completely different than a cis man, how my ligaments have shrunk alongside my height and shoe size, increasing the risk of injury, how my jump height has lowered, how my VO2 max has lowered, or the fact that my birth certificate, my passport, my driver's license, and my social security card all recognize me as a woman, because that's what I am. The year that followed was absolutely hellish. Men who were slower than I ever was in high school started to complain about my performance. Media outlets followed my results at every possible meet. Parents targeted and ostracized me. People threatened the university and my life due to my existence on the team. And I suddenly had to manage this unrelenting wave of hate while my voice was overwhelmingly suppressed. Not a single news outlet that spoke about me told the truth. They had to lie about me over and over and over again to push their own narrative as I thrived throughout my college career. Of course, they never reached out to talk with me either. They invented their own story because the idea of a man taking over women's athletics and the ease of oppressing an incredibly small group of people suits the misogynistic Fox News far better than the truth. I broke multiple records in my indoor season, but I struggled to adjust to my body, and my times continued to be far slower than I ever used to be. My coach and I decided not to have me participate in the 400 meter at indoor nationals, and instead we focused on the 200 meter as I prepared for the outdoor season. Virginia Beach warmly greeted me to protesters and people screaming at me. I had my own private section of the stands for people who hated me, waiting right at the start line to heckle me and insult me as I prepared to race. I completely zoned them out as I started into my blocks, and the only voices I heard were that of my parents and my boyfriend. I had won my heat and thought I'd make it to finals. As I sat inside the athlete cooldown area, adults continued to yell at me from the other side of the fence. And a group of athletes came up to congratulate me, and they all formed a human wall to block the protesters from me as I recovered. This has always been the case. The athletes I compete against and with are usually incredibly supportive, and I found that often paralleled those who are just as competitive as I am. The people right-wing media like to parade around as the true winners of my races are often my friends and the people I've grown close to throughout my competition. The media has been ridiculously tone deaf to their support. Despite winning my heat at indoor nationals, I missed qualifying for finals by 0.001 seconds, and I ended up as second team All-American, finishing in 9th place. The hate only grew as I went into the outdoor season, and unsurprisingly, Hoden took a stance against me. My coach advocated for me to talk to their athletic director because he was convinced that people would understand my situation and my equitability. But, of course, no one gave me the chance to speak with them before they made their opinions. The NAIA decided to place a blanket ban on trans athletes during that season, and I had to rush to convince the NCAA not to do the same. It took an incredible amount of effort for me to merely get a piece of writing in front of the Board of Governors, despite my active attempts to communicate with them. In the end, they listened to the advice of their sports science division and didn't issue a ban. For the first time, I had news outlets that were willing to share my voice. People like Outsports had picked up my story and talked to me, but my university was incredibly hesitant to let me speak out, and I missed multiple core opportunities to share my story. I slowly started to separate myself from the department as I worked to get my own truth out to the world. I was lucky to have Jerry Brewer reach out to me. he was able to publish the first major news stories that had any depth about my actual life. I ended up finishing my collegiate season as a 2-time All-American, winning neither of the races at nationals and finishing with a 56-second performance in the finals, which is slower than I was in 8th grade. Going into the summer, it was clear that my current situation wasn't sustainable. My education had completely fallen apart as my life revolved around survival and advocating for my own ability to exist in the sport I've always competed in. I tried to transfer out of RIT to a D1 school to create a better situation for myself, but no matter how badly a coach wanted me on their team, the universities wouldn't let them. Their athletic departments would be far too scared to have a trans athlete in their schools. So I started to document my experience. And when Trump won the election, my final hope at Towson died with it. They could clearly see what would happen if they let me compete. So this is where everything ended. This is the final chart of me trying to transfer. When I came back from winter break, ready to compete for RIT once more, I felt like a complete outsider. My university wouldn't publicly stand up for me, organizations wouldn't stand up for me, and the government was actively against my existence. I continued to face that same relentless wave of hate as people threatened me without consequences. The few meets I was able to get in for the season were rust busters, barely competitive and mainly meant to prepare us for the end of the season. Before we could go to a competitive meet, however, Donald Trump pushed his new executive order, and the NCAA's blanket ban followed the day after. The ban was followed by the White House posting a video about my competition, as once again they pushed a false narrative of a man competing in women's athletics. Of course, they leave out the fact that those I raced against supported my participation and were friends of mine. I want to take a moment to reiterate, I have never once spoken to those that publicly oppose me, not because I haven't tried, but because even Democrats won't open a conversation with me. No one wants to include a trans athlete in the discussion because no one wants to platform it. I was now forced to scramble to compete. I applied to run unattached at BU's meet, something both permitted by the university's policy and followed under Massachusetts law. But the day before we left, an hour before I stepped into my car to drive down, they told me the executive order by law forced them to prevent my competition. In order to find a place to get a single race in, I drove myself up to Canada, leaving the country for the first time in my life completely alone. The competition was painful. I was without my coach and my team in an environment far less competitive than I was meant to be. But the people there were incredibly supportive. They were appalled to hear what I had to do to compete. They didn't understand it. And once again, per usual, the athletes I competed against were incredibly supportive of me. I was lucky that USA Track and Field followed IOC's 2015 guidelines, the same guidelines the NCAA had built their previous policy around and what I had competed under. The NCAA's own research considered it an over-regulation, and I competed at Ocean Breeze without issue. Once again, the environment was incredibly supportive, with athletes hoping to find when we may race together next. However, after taking a week off so I didn't have to bear another 12-hour weekend trip for a race with myself, I went to race in Maine. It was apparent that USA Track and Field had picked up on the backlash of my competition, one that once again lied about my situation and my competitors to push a false narrative, using the names of high schoolers they never talked to. They took a page out of BU's book and tried to ban me the day before the meet, claiming that they now followed World Athletics policy. Yet, the email they so kindly sent to me at 1 a.m. was while their IOC guidelines were still up and no mention of World Athletics policy was to be found. It was no surprise that during the meet, they silently changed their policy to match the email and tried to ban me. It also isn't surprising that my results from the meet have not been officially posted in order to avoid controversy. The meet fell on the same exact day as NCAA's indoor nationals. I qualified and I registered, but they never accepted my entry, and they never sent an email back explaining why. I had a shot to win the national title, but they took away my chance of their own volition. Now, on Trans Day of Visibility, the United States has completely barred my competition in every way possible. I cannot compete in the men's division because my performance has drastically decreased to be equitable in the women's. I cannot compete for the NCAA because they banned me despite their own research. I cannot compete unattached because universities are too scared to challenge Trump's executive orders. I could not compete for USA Track and Field because they changed their policy on the day of my competition to prevent me from racing. The reason I am making this video is because for the past 2 years I've tried to educate. I've desperately tried to speak with leaders, with organizations, with politicians, with the NCAA, but my voice has never reached them. The vast majority of the things I pointed to in this video were already available on my Instagram for months. What I have learned is that the truth does not matter. Fox News and outlets like them will never platform this video, and if they do, they'll segment out sections to push a narrative directly contradictory to my existence, my experiences, and my truth. People that constantly spread hate about me, they don't want to hear what I have to say because their opinions were made before they heard my voice. I have learned that Democrats, universities, and organizations that campaign for our right to exist are afraid to platform me. Not because my existence is wrong, not because my experiences aren't valuable, not because the science is lacking, but because they know the same damn thing that I do. That an argument on morals and science won't work. That we do not have control over the media and government. That it is a risk to publicly support someone that's controversial, no matter how fraudulent and unjust that controversy is. I have been systematically silenced by every aspect of the system, and I have been alone because defending trans women in athletics isn't enough of a winning strategy for them. I have left so much out of this story because I wanted to put my own experiences out there, not drag others through the mud. But know that I will always remember who didn't speak up, who wouldn't take the risk to support my right to live. The reality of our situation is this: the United States does not believe in our right to exist. They do not treat us as people. They actively violate our basic human rights. They target and oppress us without ever knowing who we are. But we aren't going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. In this country or another, I will continue to compete. I will continue to exist, and I will continue to find a way to fight for the side of science and morality. Even if this video gains no traction, it will be a reminder of where I was today and what I've experienced. As much as people try, as much as they threaten to kill me every day, they cannot erase my existence and my experiences. And I will continue to tell my story again and again until I've destroyed the false narrative that is pushed by our own ignorant and oppressive government. People are too afraid to platform us. They are too afraid to advocate for us, and they are complicit to the oppression we face. We must continue to speak up, to share our stories, and to fight for our right to exist. And please, if you want true change to happen, take a fucking risk.